Tonight, as you are fully aware, we have a very special presentation in conjunction with the Modern's upcoming exhibition, Mark Bradford in Papers, a truly beautiful exhibition of the artist's early work curated by the Modern's former chief curator, Michael Auping. The exhibition is evidence of Michael's instincts for thoughtful, well-cited installations, and Mark Bradford's stunning paintings could not be better suited for the Tadao Ando galleries and Michael's curatorial skills. And if you haven't seen the show, I think you're going to agree with me. Tonight's presentation sheds light on those paintings, the career they represent, and the artist himself, as Michael Auping lays historical groundwork and leads a lively discussion with Mark Bradford and two friends, Cleo Hill-Jackson and Knowles Lawson, who each share experiences and stories with the artist that should enlighten and entertain all of us. Michael Auping really needs no introduction in this auditorium. He has given many lectures and moderated many panel discussions here, as I think some of you know. But for the record, Michael came to the Modern from the Albright Knox in 1993. As chief curator, he brought us exhibitions such as Philip Guston, Declaring Space, and Frank Stella, a retrospective, in addition to building a strong and impressive permanent collection, all of which has afforded this museum an important international reputation. In 1990, Michael was the curator of the American Pavilion at the 44th Venice Biennale, which featured the artist Jenny Holzer and won that year's Golden Lion for Best Pavilion. Retiring from the Modern in 2017, he now works on projects across the globe as an independent curator and writer, hence Mark Bradford in Papers. Mark Bradford is, of course, the focus of the Modern's exhibition, as well as this Tuesday evening program, a focus that he is more than happy to share with everyone who joins him tonight. Mark, represented by Hauser and Wirth Gallery, fully qualifies as a world-famous artist, having a vast international exhibition record, including the 57th Venice Biennale, where he represented this country in the American Pavilion with the exhibition Tomorrow is Another Day, curated by Katie Siegel and Christopher Bedford, which made an indelible impression on the 2017 Biennale for its no-holds-barred urgency that set viewers on just the right edge. Mark is an incredibly generous artist who, in addition to making dense, conceptually powerful abstract paintings and being an artist that other artists look to for direction and inspiration, conceived and founded Art and Practice along with philanthropist and collector Eileen Harris Norton and social activist Alan DeCastro. It's a foundation and facility committed to the needs of foster youth within the community and providing the community with free access to museum-curated contemporary art, a remarkable endeavor to say the least. Yeah, exactly. As mentioned, we are happy to have two friends of Mark Bradford's joining the discussion and adding valuable insight from their particular perspectives. Cleo Hill-Jackson, as I understand it, has known Mark for a very long time. I think maybe that's an understatement, with connections that run long and deep. She has had an illustrious career as a leading hairstylist in Los Angeles, bringing her much-deserved local and national recognition. In addition to owning and operating her own salon in LA, she funded and served as executive director of Student National Hairstyle Competition, an educational scholarship program. She has been a guest artist at both the International Beauty Show in New York and the Bronner Brothers International Beauty Trade Show in Atlanta, and she is developing the African American Cosmetologist Hall of Fame. So, I know, high five. Tina Knowles Lawson is well known as a businesswoman and fashion designer with an international reputation and, important to note, Texas connections. In 1990, Tina opened the Houston Salon Headliners, which became one of the city's most famous salons. I think many of you are aware of her fashion brands, House of Darion, founded with her daughter Beyonce, and Miss Tina by Tina Knowles. It goes without saying that her cultural contributions are vast in both her business ventures and having given issue to her talented and celebrated children. Before we begin, I would like to note that Hauser and Wirth Gallery and Mark Bradford's studio have been incredibly helpful in making tonight happen, as have many of the sweet people of the Modern. So without naming names, I would like to send out a personal thank you to all of you, and you know who you are, for all of your help tonight. It couldn't have happened without you. And finally, this is such a special night that I know there might be the temptation to capture it on your phones. But Mark Bradford and I'm including Mark so that I have some clout here. Mark Bradford and I would like to ask that we all just be here, just appreciating the experience, being in the moment, as they say, without any phone pics. Can I get a show of hands? We can agree to do that? Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so with that, please turn off your phones and put them away where you can't grab them when you're most tempted to, okay? Thanks so much for accommodating us on that. And with that, I invite you to join me in a warm welcome for our wonderful guests tonight.
Good evening. Oops. Good evening. I'm Mark Bradford. That is Michael.
I'm Michael Auping.
Tina Knowles and Cleo. I wanted to start by briefly talking about why I did this exhibition. The paintings are remarkably beautiful. They're from a very early period in Mark's career when he was actually tranquil. And was able to make beautiful things quietly. But also I think they make a unique contribution to American art history, which I now think is as much about materials as it is about art. So this is a piece outside the museum that I'm sure many of you know of, and it's made of Corten steel by Richard Serra. And it has an imposing beauty, but at the same time, it says something about the content of steel. And the idea that many people have noted that it kind of represents America's manufacturing prowess and its durability. And it would seem crazy to start an end paper lecture with this. But the one thread that Richard's work and Mark's has, and many others, is a thread of materials. And in the case of Richard Serra, those materials are very front forward. And in the case of Mark Bradford, the materials are much more subtle. And the content of Richard's work is front forward, where the content of Mark's is more hidden. And as Mark says, you know, art materials are always personal, we make them personal, but they are often also connected to something else. In my case, it's community. And in Mark's case, that community is the hair salon and the hair salon industry. And this is one of Mark's photographs of a beauty salon supply store. And before we get to talking too much about the end papers, I wanted to show you some. These are what end papers look like.
Praise the Lord.
They're about this large. They come in a package of 1,000. How much are they, Mark?
50 cents.
50 cents.
Woo, that was cheap.
50 cents. They're translucent, and when liquid is applied to them, they collapse into the surface that they're put on. So it creates a very nuanced spatial situation going on. This is Mark in his mother's beauty salon, or maybe in your beauty salon.
Yeah, that was Alan's. Yeah, that was mine. Yeah, that's Boots. Yeah,
That's Boots.
Yeah, we just stopped by. The woman's hair that I'm styling is
94.
Boots. 94, and she's.
Her husband is 90, and she said she's a cougar.
Oh, okay.
So I'd like to start by asking you, Cleo. You were with Mark's mother, and you saw Mark grow up in the beauty salon. And could you just give us a sense of what Mark was like in the beauty salon in those days? What role he played, and if you saw any inklings of a radical creative nature, we'll say.
Well, I have a personal saying about Mark as a young man, an old man in a young body, because he has certain sensory perception of what's right and wrong. He's always gotten that from his mother, from his friends, and from people like him, artists. And I've watched him grow up to be quite a young man. And other people, his friends, they have good things to say about him. And that's what life is all about. Having people that like you and care about you and appreciate what you do. And that's just, in a nutshell. Then Mark is cool, and other people say nice things about him.
The check's in the mail.
His mama would whip his ass if he was doing anything.
Tina, you knew Mark very early on, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the space of the hair salon and the atmosphere that it creates for young people. And you have children that are very creative who also grew up in a hair salon, and how you think that space affects a young person in terms of their creativity and even social skills.
Well, we were speaking about this right before we came on, all the things that happened in a hair salon. And it was just tremendous creativity, but it was also so much support and camaraderie. And people ask me all the time, because my kids used to sweep the salon up. That's how they made their money to go to Astroworld or Six Flags. And but they got to be around all of these creative people, professional people, people from all walks of life. And there was no judgment there. You know, they were free to be super creative, and they just got a lot of reinforcement. And they learned to love we were talking about this earlier, my girls love other women. So they learned that in that salon because that's what was going on there. It was just camaraderie and support and inspiration. And, you know, they performed at the salon all the time. We had a captive audience because, of course, people were under the dryer and they couldn't leave. Trust me, they were not happy all the time, but, you know, they couldn't get away. And it just gave them the confidence to do what they're doing now. And they in interviews, they talk about how it was to grow up in that kind of environment with all of that support and creativity, and it helps them to be who they are now with confidence.
And let's see. I also wanted to ask both of you, and you too, Mark, about, I mean, when you see the show, you'll see that Mark's color sensibility is odd. It's kind of acidy, it's got a burn to it, sometimes it's very subtle. And some of the early end paper paintings you were using hair dye that you found in the salon, right? It was a leftover hair dye.
I mean, 43G Spring Honey is actually a color from Clairol. I mean, I used what I had. and I didn't have much money coming out of grad school, and this material spoke to me, and I just used what was around me. So the colors are never something that I created. The colors were really everything that I found in the hair salon. I mean, the beauty supply. So I would just go down and I think, okay, well, I'm going to put on an ounce on Tina, so I can take another ounce and put it for the art. I would like separate it, like 1 ounce for art, 1 ounce for, and that's kind of how the earlier works. So all of the hair color, I mean, all of the titles early really are directly to do with hair color. It's almost one-to-one.
I remember that color.
Spring cut.
I do.
That was a nice little color.
Yes,
Turned a
it
little
was.
gold sometime though.
Yeah.
Clairol. They don't use Clairol like they used to.
But another thing too, we were talking about how that prepared us, me as a designer, I still dye for my daughter's costumes, I dye fabrics because I learned that basic about the color wheel in the salon, and I can tell that, like in looking, I saw the purple ones that you have, they're my favorite, with the end papers, with all the various colors.
They're upstairs.
So Cleo would represent sort of the generation of the 60s and 70s hair salon.
Before the colors.
Before-
Because we use Kool-Aid.
Kool-Aid.
You have those fabulous colors, lime, blue. You bleach the hair and have all this here. We did that as teenagers back in the 60s.
Wow. You're going to see some of those colors in these end paper paintings, even if you didn't use Kool-Aid. There are those limeade colors.
Yeah, it would be. And we overlapped this in the 80s. We both were working in the 80s, the 90s. I was kind of finishing up. I really finished up, we were talking about it a little bit earlier. I really finished up at weaving. I couldn't weave because what I found is that weaving, the first foundational is that little cornrow. Well, usually cornrowing is passed down from girl to girl when they're sitting on the porch or with girlfriends. So when weaving came in, I couldn't do the cornrow. So I really just had to have somebody cornrow and do so I kind of stopped in the 90s. That was
Well, it worked out for you.
and you too.
Very good.
The birth of the
That was all right.
papers.
When you walk through the exhibition, you need to look carefully at some of these paintings. I mean, you do with all paintings, but with these, there are little bits of information embedded in them, and often little words. And one of the words you'll see in a number of them is click. And you know where that comes from.
What you think of?
Well,
think about it. Click. Click, 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 click.
Curling iron.
Curling iron, girls.
Oh, wow, I love that.
This repetition, this syncopation, this repetition, things that I would hear all the time. And I was constantly laying one paper after another. So this idea of serial repetition, doing things over and over and over and over and over again, small units that make a whole. So yeah, the click, 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 that's where it came from. Because I would get a callus, on a callus right there.
You had to have the callus.
Because you were clicking all day.
Yeah.
Yep.
And in a lot of the paintings, you need to pay attention to the titles. And they can sometimes seem confusing, like they're fragments of language. And I'm assuming that, you talked a lot in the beauty salon.
Absolutely. You were a therapist.
Yes. You couldn't be a hairstylist and not be a talker. Right? And
A listener. You also got to do a lot of
for
listening,
sure.
and you got to keep a lot of secrets.
Right.
If they tell you they don't color their hair and you're clearly looking down at those roots that see otherwise, you're like, that's right, I believe you. They're not ready for it, right? They're not ready for it. The guy says, Mark, am I losing my hair in the top? And I know he's not ready for it. Not at all.
No.
Not at all.
one of the things you'll see in the show, both in a video that we have put alongside the show, in some of the titles, and Mark talks about it a lot, is how important women have been to his career. Strong women, business women, and the idea of the beauty salon was like a place, where women could make it themselves, make their own money, make their own business. And one of the artists you gravitated to as a young painter was a strong woman, Agnes Martin. And there's a small room in the exhibition where I've installed a group of works by Agnes Martin called On a Clear Day. And across from it, you'll find a number of Mark's paintings that very much echo Agnes Martin's work. The difference being, though, that Agnes Martin's abstract landscapes were about the high deserts of New Mexico and the clear air, where Mark's have a kind of a burned, smoky quality that I think references LA. And I did want to point out, this is when we were in, there was a work in the show that's site-specific, end papers put directly on the wall by Mark and his assistants. And this is a table of end papers that have been cut up and burned. And the burning was to create that line so he could create a grid on his paintings. But you also said that at a certain point you recognized that the burn was the color of your skin.
Yeah, I mean, I did start to see that there was that burning and the history of burning and like politically in cities and my own skin. There was like crossover, but it wasn't so over-determined, but it was another subtext that was kind of in the work. And I just allowed it to be. Really, the first time I did the burning was because white on white, I couldn't see the end of it. So I had to kind of create a marker, and I thought, oh, and I had a lighter. And I just kind of, you know, the liquor store lighters, them little you wear the little liquor store lighters, and I just used it, and that was kind of the first time.
And you're, as the show moves forward, you begin to see that these are not just abstractions, both in their imagery and in their titles, that they do reference the environment around Mark's studio. So On a Clear Day by Agnes Martin, the title of this by Mark Bradford is On a Clear Day, You Can See All the Way to Watts. Which actually, it's hard to see all the way to Watts from South San. You can't, it's too smoggy and burned up.
But I was just really, I was trying to just connect what I do to art history. I mean, I wanted to be an abstract painter, but I was using this material that belonged to a local place, 1 foot, I guess, in the Salon and 1 foot in art history. And I'm just really trying to create these relationships between the two. I'm not exactly trying to give you 100%, I know exactly where it's going. I was just trying to create a conversation between the two. So I understood On a Clear Day as belonging to art history and modernism. And I just thought, well, on a clear day, I can see all the way to Watts. Just extending it and maybe making it more local. Everything was so intuitive. I was just trying to figure it out as I was making it. I didn't have this whole script laid out. I just knew this material pointed to 2 places. And that made sense for me. And I was just going to go with it.
Well, I wish you all could have been in the green room and listening to these ladies and Mark talk about stories of customers that would come in to the salon. And I mean, like the title of this, I mean, it's a kind of digital landscape, and 20 minutes from any bus stop. So, you know, people weren't coming into the salons driving up in their Mercedes.
Well, sometimes they were.
Were they?
You know, well, that was a great thing about, I mean, if you look at all of us economically in class, I mean, I would say it would go from people driving Mercedes all the way to people who were state dependent and everything in between. So you really had to navigate class in a very subtle way. I mean, a judge might sit next to someone that might be a stripper. And that was totally okay within those environments. So class was something that you had to navigate in a very delicate way, because these were all we're all black women and all navigating and kind of doing this aesthetic thing, and everyone kind of owning their particular space. And so no class ruled the salon. No one was getting whisked to the back of the green room. You got put under the dryer and you wait 2 hours, and then like everybody else. But that's just the way So there was a kind of a socialist kind of like, we're all the same in here. And so for me, although it's funny though, me and Tina, we talk about our history, or Cleo, she came, I was a press and curl man. Like I pressed and curled and put the towel over my shoulder, local, non-integrated. Were there white people that came to your hair salon?
A few.
A few?
Predominantly
It was predominantly, yeah. So we actually worked in these kind of predominant spaces, but within that there was a lot of fluidness, class-wise, gender-wise, sexuality-wise. Even from within, there was a lot of difference. I mean, look. And I'm actually looking out, it's funny though, because Cleo worked in the same salon with me for over 20 years, but I can look at the audience and I can see her grandson that she raised, which is Tyrone, sitting in the front seat nodding his head all the time.
My sugar.
I remember when he was 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 and 9 and 10, 11, and there he is now with his own son. So it's
It's amazing.
it's a circle of life.
Yeah.
Turn around and wave to everybody.
That's my Ty, who is the father of Luke.
Mark Sidney Bradford Jr.
Luke, 3 months old, and he's the sweetest African-American Guatemalan little baby you ever saw. He's so gorgeous and sweet. And we were watching Lucille Ball a couple of weeks ago, and a piece of music came on, and he wiggled them fingers. I said, I knew it. He just...
That's the African-American side, I guess.
Because Mark is a piece of work. For a young
Where'd that
man,
come from?
For a young man to be as conscious, it's because his mother has a lot to do with it, because she's an exceptional individual. And he has always been unique. He would see some piece of trash and he would get it and make something beautiful out of it. But you have to be careful. He'll give it away or throw it away. You know,
Not anymore.
But thanks to Alan. No, I'm saying that he made something for his mother that was exceptional. He called it Frankenhooker. It was a piece of art, and it was a woman up to the ceiling. It was fabulous. And a movie was around that time about this prostitute that was a Frankenhooker. And the rains came. He had it stuck out there in the rain. And everybody, his mom, is just wondering.
Someone left the cake out in the rain.
I know. But an exceptional.
Only a few people know that reference.
His friends of old are still his friends today, and that's a sign of being okay to me. When you still have those people that loved you before, after, and tomorrow. You know, I think I'll give you an A.
So when...
I remember the end papers because that morning we got to the salon. He said, I got it. He conceived of the whole plan of action in his head. I remember that day you were so excited because you had figured out your scheme in your head. Figured a way out. Yeah.
But did he use up all the end papers? Did y'all have some left to work?
Girl, they were 50 cents a box. I could always go buy them.
And would burn and singe around them and do things to them. Wow. Imagination is a wonderful gift from the Almighty. That's what it is.
Well, you both witnessed him transition from the hair salon to being an artist. And any of us who are involved in the art world know the look of our parents when we say, we're going to be an artist. Or we're going to go to art school. Oh, great. You know, you have a good paying job. And Mark owned the business at a certain point. And so what did you all think when he announced that he was going to go to art school?
Well, actually, I didn't know him, Mark, back then, but Cleo did.
I know. Yeah, Cleo knew him back then.
I've known Mark would work 8 hours in the beauty salon and get in his car and go to school at night, tired. But he made it through and got his master's degree. Say, right. You have to be, you just have to be determined.
And broke, you know. With no plan B. You gotta have no plan B. That's what you
No plan B. My husband says that all the time. It has
You can't
to be
have
your
a plan. You gotta have a little bit of,
That's
you gotta
right.
just have a little bit of low self-esteem and no plan B. Just a little bit of low. You can't have a lot of low self-esteem because you won't do anything. You just gotta have a little bit.
That's very
Now,
correct.
I'm showing these images of a famous sculptor named John Chamberlain, and that's a work of his. He crushes car metal into sculptures and balances them on the floor. I'm showing it for two reasons. One is that a lot of people don't know that John, when he got out of the Navy, he used his money from the GI Bill to go to hairdresser school. And beautician school. They used to call it beautician school.
Right.
And, you know, it never occurred to me in looking at John's sculptures that are kind of rounded and head-like that they might be like hairstyles. And this is John with Diana Ross, the Supremes, and Diana Ross's mother. And John was very proud of the fact that he had done Diana Ross's mother's hair.
Wow.
And, you know, he crushes these car metal things with a large machine crusher. But I said, where did you learn to make that kind of sculpture? He said, as a hairdresser. Because he said it's about compression.
Wow.
When you're cutting hair, there's a level of compression that you have to be very careful about. Can you speak to that?
Well, I believe that, I can absolutely relate to that because there are all these angles and you can do one wrong cut and the whole thing can collapse, right?
Oh, yeah.
So the way you cut hair, the way you shape it, the products you use to, whether it's styling gel, you know, and someone is spiking their hair up or they're doing, I call them sculptures. I mean, because we get
Temporary
hairstyles
sculptures.
they're temporary.
That water hit them.
Right, but you are creating art. And I mean, you know, we talk about Bronner Brothers, which is a hair show that's in Atlanta that's huge. And I would take all of my hairstylists there because those people had bird cages. I mean, they had like literally sculptures. And so I'm sure it taught you a lot about shaping and angles and colors. And I mean, they're very, very similar. And you find a lot of people that are hairstylists, are painters. There's, you know, they not of your caliber, but they are very artistic and they can usually draw because I guess you draw on that to become an artist as a hairstylist.
And the other reason I wanted to show this was to show some bouffant hairdos, which
Those are
I had
definitely
forgotten
sculptures.
about, you know. I mean, they are truly.
They're sculptures.
They are truly sculptures, and they was the bouffant. It was the 50s and 60s.
50s and 60s. But people went to the salons more regularly than they do now. They would go in every 2 weeks and have a scheduled time that they would redo their do.
Right.
And,
Well, bouffant came back again in like the 90s. I mean, remember, what's the girl's name? Jennifer Aniston had the poof type bouffant thing. And then when Beyonce did one of the Sasha Fierce, she had this big bouffant thing. So it comes back all the time, but that is truly like a sculpture because you tease, you spray, you put products in it, and you shape it, and so it does become a sculpture. I think things could be living in there, you know.
Right?
Well, as it turns out, Mark has gone back to it too.
Oh, yeah.
This is one of Mark's most recent video works, and it's called Dancing in the Streets, and it shows Martha and the Vandellas doing a performance, and I'm just going to play a little bit of it right now.
So it's projected onto the city of Watts, which in 1965 would have burned in the Watts Rebellion. I was leaning out of a car, so you'll see when it's uneven in it, but I like the way it abstracts, and also it really has a relationship with the environment, and it almost looks like the 60s, but then you realize that actually it's, when you see the trucks in the modern day, so it's like,
Well, one of the reasons I wanted to show that in the exhibition, it's not actually in the exhibition proper, but in a side gallery, is because the show isn't just about end papers, it's about hair. And that video is very much, it's dancing hair. You know, it's just hair dancing across the facades of those buildings in Watts.
And you know, I love that song, Dancing in the Streets, because it was, it has these two histories. One history is that it was this great Motown song about the summer, and also the other subversive history was that it was used as a cry of protest. And as the song would play in these cities, that actually those cities would actually erupt into sort of political violence. I like these things that have these double meanings, these kind of like double readings.
Yeah.
Well, here is on the left here is an installation shot of one of the rooms at the Venice Biennale, where Mark represented the United States. And in the center is Medusa. Medusa is in this show. And before you enter the first gallery of this show, there is a giant Medusa, which is a large, I read it as a large head of hair being teased up. And watching him tease it up before we installed it
It's
was
amazing. Amazing.
and the two paintings are based on muse, on muses. And I show it with this photograph because it's about women. And it's about, I mean, in a way, you guys, these are the muses of Mark's life, his mother, and all the women in those beauty salons. And maybe you can talk about why you did those particular muses.
I always liked the myth of Medusa, but I would always, you know, I had a really vivid imagination, and when something didn't make sense, sometimes I would redo it. So I always liked the idea of Medusa, but I never liked how the guy cut off her head by using a mirror, and then so in my mind, Medusa was just, I love this idea of this fierce woman that could just turn a man to stone by looking at him.
Sounds like a client.
I just used to think that was so fabulous. I was like, wow, she can just turn that man to stone. Anybody who's messing with her, anybody who's like, oh, she just turns. But growing up in a hair salon and in a family, well, you know, my mom could kind of turn you to stone with that look. I wish you would. So that piercing gaze that could turn people to stone, I really like that. The idea of the coiling, it really is so funny though. I was more interested in the gaze this kind of rage that could be almost made into something physical. Of course, a man wrote the story and he had to chop her head off at the end, right? So that he could be the hero. But I always liked that kind of determination. And I saw that just over and over and over again. And there's also, but then actually this kind of silence, this kind of on the surface silence and underneath so many things going on at the same time. I would see that all the time, that kind of quiet determination, but kind of silence on the outside of the surface, just a ripple. We constantly talk about patriarchy in the black community, the black church run by the pastor, but really the day-to-day is really run by the women. The largest, one of the oldest economic engines in the black community is still the beauty salon, run by women, for women, supported by women. And I don't feel like it gets the respect that it should as an economic, historical engine that's always been. So this kind of fierceness and the kind of silence and mystery and depth, I don't know, it all kind of just came together. And it's really interesting because Boots.
This is Cleo.
That's Cleo standing with Boots and me. What's wrong
And
with
she
my
is
face?
fierce, though. But look at her.
And you know,
gorgeous.
I just went by her. It's interesting though because with Cleo, we were in the studio a week before I came here. She said, "Oh, Mark, can we go by Boots' house?" And I wrote a catalog and I said to Boots, and we went by the house, but she wasn't there. We gave it to the next door neighbor to give to her. I did a video so that Boots could see that I came by, and this was just
A couple weeks, there's 2 weeks.
before we went to go get something to eat. But So these overlays and these circular conversations that happen, I'm really interested in, and it all kind of. But Tina, surprisingly enough, reminds me so much of a dear friend who was always in the hair salon for 30 years. She looks just like a friend of mine, and then I look just like someone in her family. So we just kind of pressed past. We just went past go really fast.
So I wanted to show just very briefly how the end papers led to the kind of work Mark does now. He started, the end papers were the first of his so-called social papers or biographical papers. And he then began grabbing papers from outside of his studio. Trash, basically, merchant posters, advertisements, and at a certain point, billboards. I mean, to the extent that and you know, these things are put up in layers constantly. Every week, a new ad. Every week, a new merchant poster. And he would just rip these thick things off. This is from the Tate Gallery in London. And this is a huge painting. It's his first large painting. It's in this show. And it's when you're starting to see these other papers enter his work. And the last thing you'll see in the exhibition is a work called Kingdom Day, which the museum purchased about 12 years ago. And it's immense. And it has the backing of it is a large billboard for Kingdom Day Parade in South Central. And I wanted to show this particularly because on the left is Mark's studio, images from Mark's studio, how he stacks his materials before he goes to work on a painting. On the right is a beauty salon store where they sell materials. And I think it's like he's blown up the salon into a huge contemporary studio.
And I like things stacked up. Isn't that funny? I like things on the shelf, stacked up. I like to know that I have enough of them.
You do.
My partner likes to do that in the home. I like to do it in the studio.
But I really think so much of the process of your work is embedded in these early end paper paintings, even if you can't see it.
Right.
It's there, you know, and even to the point that, you know, when you cut hair, before you cut it, you have to wash it.
Right.
So there's always water involved.
I've been standing on my feet in 20 years, washing hair, and then 20 years more water. But I guess I just that's true.
Well, for these last 15 minutes, I thought it'd be nice if you all could ask some questions to Tina and Cleo and Mark.
Can I just say something before we finish?
Absolutely, I'm sorry.
I just want you guys to understand who Mark is as a person, because I was so blown away by his realness and just down to earth, and he stays so connected. I think that's why his work is so brilliant, because it started from a real place. He didn't just say, well, I'm going to do this style. It came from his surroundings and the materials that were there. And just the fact that I visited he and Alan, and they are so involved in staying in the community and making the community better. He works with these foster kids. They are renovating buildings in the neighborhood. He could live clearly anywhere he wanted to, but he stayed there and just gave so much of himself to the community. And I think that's why his work is so genius, because it's really connected. It's not just a fantasy. It's something that's real and organic. So I just wanted to say that.
Very well said. Very well said. Any questions? Go ahead.
Welcome to Fort Worth. Do you want me to?
Do you need one of these?
No. Welcome to Fort Worth. We're really excited to have you here. This caliber of art art here. I really enjoyed watching your piece and the museum over the years. What is it that you are wanting the viewer to walk away with?
When you're standing
In front of your pieces, like what is it that you're inspired by, and like what is the viewer going to see?
You know,
walk away with?
I think when you start making a body of work, or when you start to make work, you want to point the viewer in the conversation that you want to have, but you know you can't control it fully. Anybody who thinks you can control 100% of the conversation once it leaves your studio, it's not going to happen. But you just want to point this, you want to point the viewer where you want the conversations to go, and that's it. I just want to point you sort of where I hope you go.
Where do you want us to go?
Well, it depends. Dancing with the Streets, I hope you kind of think about fragmentation and memory and nostalgia and political unrest and spaces in between, but maybe you might not go there, and maybe I've not done my job. So I just try to, and that's about all I can do.
My question is, how do you make a decision the size of your pieces that you have and the different subjects that you have? Once you've finished one, do you have more than one at the same time? Do you have a decision that I think I want to do this now?
Well, I'm a big reader. I'm always reading popular culture, art history, and then everything on the internet.
Big library.
You know, and then in the middle of the night you go on YouTube and fall down a rabbit hole, and then you end up like in some weird like anime site where you're like, wow. It really, I can't tell you, but all I can say is that they're like relationships. People ask me all the time, how do you know when a painting, when a work is done? And I always say, how do you know when a relationship is done? You know. It takes you a little bit while to get out of it, but you know when it's done. And that's real, that's true. But I can't tell you exactly. I just know I follow the things that I'm interested in. It's like a chain. This idea, I become interested in another idea, and I read a book, or I might see an exhibition. It really is just like, like gymnasts, you have these rings, and you grab one, and you swing out on the other one, and that's really all it is. I mean, they can be varied. It can be, I can watch Watchmen on HBO, and that'll trigger something, but then I can read art history, and that'll trigger something. For me, it's triggers. Someone actually can say something, like a phrase, and I'll say, oh, well, what's that? What does lit mean? Why do you guys use that? Then they're like, oh my God, old guy. In what context do you use lit? I mean, so it's just, it can come from anywhere. I'm always listening. And it triggers something, and then I just follow it. I remember I used to be in the car with my mom sometimes, and I'd look, and there'd be a nightclub or something, and I'd say, oh, Mom, what are they doing in there? And she said, well, you don't need to know. And in my head, I was like, not for a couple years. But I bet you I'm gonna go and find out. So it's just,
Hi, Mark.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you and welcome here. I do have a question. How do you hope that your work impacts people who might not have had the experiences depicted in what your work is showing?
That's a good question. How do you hope that my work impacts people that maybe don't come from the same view, same relationship to it?
Right, and they weren't there.
They don't know about M Papers, the beauty shop. Yeah.
The Mandelas, they have no idea. So how do you hope your work connects to those folks?
Well, I think all I can do is just make the most authentic work I can make and be the most specific as to why I'm making it. And I think that you can see work that like Art Povera. I certainly wasn't part of this movement in Italy, but I can investigate it and I can learn from it. So I think that it's interesting I love to fall into work that maybe I have an attraction to, but I don't have the same background, or I don't even have the same understanding of it. So I just try to make it as clear. I try to make my work as clear as it can be, and then it just actually is a container. And anybody can enter into it from however, the front door, back door, museum door, under the door.
And it's
all
also,
you can do.
to me, education. I know that
That
it's
is
not
true.
but to educate other people about that particular situation.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, that's true. There's a lot of
There. No, her, in front of you.
Me? Okay.
Yeah.
So this question is as far as like getting into the arts. How did you get over the fear of fully like committing yourself to your work and leaving something like a regular job, like working in the salon, into just fully transitioning to being an artist?
Slowly. You have to move slowly. Yeah, me and Tina, we've talked about this, like why you work in a hair salon, you make your own money, you have to kind of step. If you commit to the arts, you've committed. You've decided you want to be an artist. Committing to the arts should not be connected to monetarily how much you make off of the arts. The young girls working in the hair salon singing for all the customers under the dryer were certainly not thinking that something was going. They were just committed to being performers. So I had committed to being an artist, but I knew that I had to pay my bills. Now, paying your bills and being an artist, I knew were separate things. I knew that being an artist was something I was going to do my whole life, but I knew that I had to pay my bills. So I just separated them. Like, being an artist is my life's work, and I'm going to do that whether I make money or I don't, but I do have to pay that light bill. And the phone, or they're going to cut it off. So for me, I don't associate people when they say, well, this person is a waiter. I said, no, that person is an actor, and he pays his bills off being a waiter, or that person is an artist and they do X, Y, and Z. So I quit very early. I separated the two. You have to find a way to pay your bills. So I would say do it in as little days as possible so that you can have more days to do your work. And so when I was in the hair salon, that's how I paid the bills. And then slowly, I left the hair, I slept very slowly, I left the hair salon when I thought that this other gig would kind of work out. So it's just that slowly. But don't collapse them. Paying your bills and being an artist are two separate things.
But you also work constantly. I mean, as an artist, Mark works pretty much every day, and he'll be the first to tell you that only amateurs wait for inspiration.
Oh,
You've got to work.
No. You got to just show up.
Work makes work.
Well, I think I learned that I'm going to say in the beauty shop. You guys call it the salon, right? We were fun. You work with what you got, and you show up every day. I would work in the hair salon. I would show up at 8 o'clock in the morning. There'd be a row of people, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, waiting at the door. Now, depending on what I did Friday night, I might be a little hungover, or whatever. But I mean, you work. You start to work. You just go to work. So I do that in the studio. Every day is not a good day. Matter of fact, half the days are not good days. I'm mostly nervous. I don't know, but I can show up. One thing I can do is I can show up and I can flip those lights on, and I can tell Diego and J2 sometimes they'll, my assistants will look at me, and they're like, okay, Mark, what we're going to do? And I'll say, put some of that paper in the water. I have no idea why I told him. Put those different, Mark, that color? Yeah, that color, absolutely. I have no idea. But they're looking like, so I can show up, and I can get out of my head, and I can move forward.
Yes.
Mark, ritual comes to mind. You are just encompassed in ritual. Did ritual ever come to you regarding rituals in Africa with head mask and hair and all that in your earlier works?
No. Let me see, ritual. No. No, I'm just ritual, like doing something every day, the same thing over and over. I do that. Like I order the same clothes on Amazon, like black pants, like jeans, black shirts, and white, because I don't like to think about things. So it's very bright. I kind of get the same 5 restaurants all the time, My partner always wears Birkenstocks. So there's something about ritual or structure that I'm quite attracted to, because my personal life growing up was so fluid, so up and down, so many interruptions outside of what I could control, that I like these kind of rituals or structures. That's why I like the little end papers. It was a structure that I could kind of, so this idea of something that's organic and something that's structural, yeah, but I never thought it would, but it might be kind of ritual. Lord, please. Could be, yeah.
Mark, would you say a little something about Pickett's Charge?
Pickett's Charge, yeah. I did a cyclorama at the Hirshhorn. It was a commission that they asked me to do. I didn't know that much about Pickett's Charge, but I was responding to the architecture, which was circular. They had this circular architecture, and I said, oh, what could I do that was circular? What imagery? I started doing research on dioramas and cycloramas, came across Pickett's Charge, and came across, Pickett was one of it was the watermark of the Civil War. It was kind of turned it from the South winning to the North winning. And it was kind of interesting working with that material and being kind of African American and kind of going to Gettysburg and going to the site that this would happen and going to, they have a reenactment of it, and it was, working with the material actually had very much of a kind of an emotional content, because that war had so much to do with what happened to African American people afterwards. So I found myself looking for African American people in the Pickett's Charge, which was done by a Frenchman, Philippe Philippidou. That's a funny name. But I was curious. I dove into it. I dove into that problematic history, that uncomfortable history, and kind of like to unpack things. I like to make things my own. I don't mind going down rabbit holes or backing myself into corners. I found it interesting and engaging.
Great work.
Thank you. The back. Okay, over here. Yeah, the braids. The braids on both sides. Girl, I can describe the hair now.
For you being from a salon, working in the salon, have you ever thought about doing a hair piece or a sculpture?
No. Not really. I mean, yeah, not really.
What was her question?
Would I ever think about doing a hair piece for like a sculpture or something like that? No.
You did that before. Remember an exhibit you did? You did it on a statue, remember? Long time ago.
No, girl, that was...
Well, I think we need to cut it off there.
One more, just a couple more, yeah.
I knew you'd say that as soon as I...
You too, yeah.
That's all I had to do.
Michael, yes.
So I'm just curious about, where are you? Are you inside of your studio in this photograph, or where is this?
Yes, that's my studio. I have a big studio, yes, in Los Angeles. And those are power washers. They do. They drain all on the floor, and we got to push all the water out. And
they work.
And it's covered, it's wet. The shoes are wet. It just, it's messy. I don't like being messy, but it is because I'm able to disengage the material and peel it back in a way. I'm always trying to find different ways to make surfaces. That's what you do, sort of. I make surfaces, and so this is just another way of making a surface. But it is, when I'm using the power wash, I have to, every once in a while, I do have those flashback and remember those hoses, those fire hoses of the 1960s being turned on people. It does sometimes catch me in that, like I think about it. But it's another way to make a surface. But it's a little bit more, I have to admit, it's a little bit more aggressive. Diego doesn't like, my sister, he don't like using it. It's funny. If I tell him, Diego, get out the power washer. The power, don't you want the sand? Diego don't like the power wash. That's funny. That's wave, Diego, so everybody can know who you are. And the one with the curly hair, yeah.
Yes, thank y'all for coming. I'm Shadria LaBouvier, and I wanted to just ask, when you were talking about class and how that works in your, like in the ecosystem of the beauty salon, and this is open to all of you, how does that materialize in how you think about the construction of the work? Because you referenced class quite a bit, or class dynamics, and I can kind of I have ideas, but I just wanted to hear more about how that subversiveness or the richness or all of that kind of shows up or doesn't show up.
Tina?
Well, I see it in his work because it's so socially conscious. One of my favorite pieces is at LACMA. I don't know if I should say that, and it has the words to one of the police killings of a young man and his daughter's in the car, and I mean, this thing made me cry because it was just the most gorgeous piece, but it also, and at first when I looked at it, I said, oh my God, I love this piece. It's massive, and the colors and the texture of it was beautiful. And then I started reading, and I said, I recognize that from somewhere, but I see so much in the titles and the work. I see Watts, I see, Crenshaw, I see so much of the history and the things that he's seen, and he just keeps the work coming, and it's brilliant because it's socially conscious. So I think that's how it connects to classes. And definitely that makes me think of certain classes. Yeah.
How do I... Class and race are sometimes interchangeable, oftentimes, and I am always interested in kind of dismantling these large things of like, that's all Latin, they're all, so within that, there are class dynamics like every other kind of group. And I think that in the hair salon, this kind of fluidity of moving back and forth was as germane to everything as what you were making, or what you were constructing on the hair. So I'm very much aware of what who is seeing a merchant poster. It's people that take public transportation. Merchant posters are the things that are posted on telephone poles. Google, iPhones, Apple, those are billboards. They're above your head. The difference I've noticed is that oftentimes merchant poster, there already is a built-in audience, there already is a crisis, there already is people in need. They're just filling something that's already there, whereas with Apple, they're kind of, you really want this watch, you really want this car. So I'm always aware of class. I'm always, we were backstage and we were talking about hairstyle, and I said, well, I had a Jerry curl. And did you have a Jerry curl? And I said, yeah, I had a Jerry curl. Well, I'm very much aware of what that means to have a Jerry curl, because everybody in the 80s did not have a Jerry curl. Like, some people did and some people didn't. The Jerry curl is the butt of every joke. But it's all the debate around hair, straight hair, natural hair, all of this is class. So I'm very much aware of the material that I use and the kind of the memory of class within it. If you noticed, Michael had the image of me unrolling the billboard paper in the streets with my assistant. Well, my assistant had on looks like a city worker vest. Well, I knew that if a black man and a Latino went into public space with a city worker uniform on, we'd be invisible. And we were invisible. All day long, we were working, pulling it off the streets, completely invisible. So I'm always aware of the material and the class language around it.
Thank you.
Yes.
Well, thank you all for coming. I want to thank you, Mark, Cleo, Tina, thanks so much.
Thank you guys for coming. Appreciate it. And I want to thank all the students that I met with today at TCM and yesterday. listen, you guys are the next ones. You guys should all stand up. Let everybody acknowledge who you are. Don't be shy. Get used to it. Come on, you wrestler, come on. Everybody here, everybody, all of you guys. Turn around so they can... Yep. Because what I truly believe in is like if you ever you see that sapling and you have to be that post and that sapling kind of until that sapling can move up and be strong, that post kind of supports it, and once they're strong in who they are, we take that post away. We all have to be the post for each other when other people are not strong enough or when they're moving up through whatever they need to. And that is something that I truly believe in, and I believe in that more right now in the world. We do all have to be that post for each other. So that's my last thought of the night.
Okay. We'll go back outside.